Okay, so like most things with music, there's a cheap and easy way to do this, or we can take our time and do it right. Now, looking at the title, you're probably thinking to yourself, why don't you just have a jump scare? Just have it go from absolute silence to a really loud sound and scare somebody. There's a couple things that suck about that. So first, if you're really interested in like the neurology behind a jump scare, or as they call it, the startle response, then check out this other video I made about how to like control somebody's mind with music. But as far as like the compositional efficacy of a jump scare, like 99% of the time, they're just gonna suck. Film critics are always talking about how cheap jump scares feel in these horror films, and most of the time they are really cheap. The only way you could really make a jump scare work is if you've actually earned it. See, you have to set up a suspenseful scene that then leads into a jump scare. And the same thing goes for music. You can't just go from absolute silence to a loud sound and call it a day. It's actually a really common mistake that a lot of beginner composers make. They try to create these really huge moments without actually building up to them. Or as filmmakers would put it, there's a payoff without a setup. So you have to have the music move from point A to point B. Now there are times when the absence of music is really effective, but in a suspenseful scene where you're really trying to earn your jump scare, you want the music to participate. So here's a really great example from Jaws. Now the music is including a couple motifs from the main theme, and Hooper ends up finding a shark tooth, so you're pretty much expecting a shark to show up out of nowhere, and then bam, floating human head with a big orchestral hit. Easily one of the best examples of the music working with a suspenseful scene to really earn that jump scare. But that's jump scares, and people have been doing that for hundreds of years, even in music. Seriously. Back in 1791, Joseph Haydn wrote Symphony No. 94, which has since been nicknamed the Surprise Symphony. Go check it out, but keep your volume low. And there's another way that composers make music scary, or at the very least, like, creepy. So it's basically done by creating a contrast between what your audience is seeing and hearing. And now this is a big point behind my Pixar video, and more or less the points stay the same. So in short, this is something I like to call creepy baby music. And you see it everywhere. A good example is like Five Nights at Freddy's, when you run out of battery and you hear that music box right before you die. Lullabies, or at least music that's played on instruments that also tend to play lullabies, is generally supposed to be a comforting experience. This is the kind of music you play to put a baby to sleep, not like go lift weights or participate in an MMA fight. So when it plays over something that's succinctly frightening, you leave the audience with cognitive dissonance. The audience is seeing something scary while listening to something that's supposed to be comforting. And that confusion really adds to the scene. And you can actually flip this technique around for comedic effect. If you take a scene with no suspense whatsoever and treat the music as dramatically as possible, you can add weight to a scene that isn't necessarily meant to be taken seriously. Just think of Kronk singing to himself in The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh, he's doing his own theme music?
But that's all the kiddie stuff. How can you really incite visceral horror into your audience using just music, even without a visual element? Now, for those of you familiar with my channel, you've probably heard this before, and you're gonna hear it again. Large things make low sounds, small things make high sounds. Kittens make cute, high-pitched sounds, lions have terrifying roars. And all humans are programmed to recognize this phenomenon and associate low sounds with large things and high sounds with small things. Not only because that's just how the universe works, but because all the potential predators, the things that can eat you, are gonna be bigger than you. So low sounds tend to come from things that are potentially dangerous, and the high sounds tend to come from things that aren't. Moreover, while the low sounds can feel like they're coming from something big and intimidating like a predator, the high sounds can actually end up feeling comforting. See, that's why those lullabies tend to have those really high instruments like celesta and xylophone, and you don't really hear lullabies being played in tuba. So what if we could send a signal to our brains that communicates the possibility of a threat, no matter how small, and then confuse that signal by playing something that's supposed to be comforting? You could basically emulate that creepy baby music effect through the music alone. So the way you want to do this is you want to play a really high sound and a really low sound at the same time and nothing else. By leaving the middle blank, the listener's mind will begin focusing incredibly hard on filling in that gap, while at the same time flailing around between trying to identify the potential threat in the viscerally intimidating low sound, and trying to understand the presence of the relatively innocuous high sounds. The main theme from Nightmare on Elm Street kinda did this. Like, they have the framework in there, but they ended up filling the gap with like melodies and harmonies, all kinds of crap, probably just to make the theme more memorable. Now, it doesn't matter who you are or how tough you are. We're triggering the primal "something is not okay" response, as if you were sitting around a campfire and you suddenly couldn't hear the crickets anymore. You see, in many cases, being able to hear the crickets at night means that there isn't something bigger and badder hanging outside the campgrounds. Because when you're in the woods, you're going to hear the danger before you see it.